Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. In this podcast series, I try to get to the books that have impacted people in my network, friends, colleagues, new connections, old connections. I want to get to those great books that these great leads have read that have impacted their lives, whether they're the author or not. And in this series, as you may know, I cover three categories of books: books where my guest is telling me about them, books that I haven't read myself, books where we've both read them specifically for the episode or we've read them in our previous lives. And then the third category is that I've been lucky enough to have actually a majority of the episodes, I think at this point, have been authors or publishers trying to get the message out of the book that they're involved in. This particular episode, my guest is going to be Edie Clarke, and we're going to go through a couple books. I'll go through how I know Edie, but she had reached out and said that she had two books that she wanted to cover. So I'm always curious as to what the interactions are between different books that we read. So I was game for it. But Edie Clarke is a highly experienced and knowledgeable remote video producer and YouTube strategist who is dedicated to helping service-based entrepreneurs leverage the power of video to enhance their online presence and achieve their business goals. Through her expertise in video production, she empowers entrepreneurs to create effective YouTube videos that showcase their knowledge and expertise in their field, attract new customers, and build a loyal following. One of the key strengths of Edie's approach is her emphasis on simplicity and user friendliness. She understands that many entrepreneurs may feel intimidated by the prospect of creating video content, and she's committed to making the process as straightforward and accessible as possible. By providing her clients with the tools and guidance they need to produce high-quality videos without a steep learning curve, she helps them build the confidence they need to succeed. In addition to her technical expertise, Edie is also a skilled strategist who understands the nuances of YouTube and how to use it effectively to reach a target audience. She helps her clients to develop content that is tailored to their specific niche and optimized for the platform, ensuring that their videos are seen by the people who most likely are to be interested in their services. Whether you are a newbie or an experienced entrepreneur, her expertise and guidance can help you take your YouTube channel to the next level. And I think Edie's one of my most random connections. We were just talking about it before I started recording about how we crossed each other's paths. Because I think she maybe had seen something that I had done or posted, or maybe I was recommended to her for her network. And what stood out was just that I think before we were even connected, maybe she had seen some of the series and had made recommendations, made connections. In terms of those connections for this series, I already posted my episode with Lisa Hammett on her book. I'll be posting Ali Berthium's episode this week. I have another one lined up with Misty Compton, a few other names that you've provided
Mhm.
to me, Edie. I thought that was amazing that you trusted me enough to see what I was doing and that you made those referrals. I'm like, okay, this lady is nice enough to reach out. She saw what I was doing. So I reached out, connected, and it's just been, and this is actually the first time that we're talking. So
Mhm.
I've spoken to all these other people. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh,
And
you're
thank you for
welcome,
those
John.
connections very much, Edie.
Anytime, anytime. It's interesting because I was at an event that I spoke to last week. I spoke at last week or the week before last. I'm losing track of my days. Um, and one of the presenters talked about networking and the act of reciprocity in the process of networking. And I walked up to her afterwards and I was like, you know what? I do it, but I don't ever think of that as the purpose for networking. It's always just for me to get to know people and understand what their backgrounds are and how they got to do what they're doing. And then obviously the side part is if there's something I can do for them, great. If there's something they can do for me, great. But I don't really, I didn't look at it from the lens that she was looking at it. And I've actually since then had this really awakening moment of how we're supposed to network because a lot of people, I can't tell you the countless times, especially on LinkedIn, that my first interaction is somebody selling me something.
Mm.
And so I don't want to be that person. I want to be somebody who's going to be able to give before they get.
Yeah, I'm thinking that through only because just finished up a chapter in a book that's coming out, and my chapter's on what I call platinum networking, and it's
Mhm.
basically what you just said.
Mhm.
Goes through my lessons in my life and how I came to be that way. But it really is about providing value for other people, not
Yeah.
just seeing you as a means to somebody else or whoever might get me
Mhm.
business. We're all here for that. Obviously, we need
Right,
to, we need to make money.
right,
Obviously,
right.
we know why we're on LinkedIn. We know why
Exactly.
we're doing podcasts and whatnot. But in the course of doing that, I want to make sure that I leave somebody better than I found them, even if just a tiny bit. So I
Mhm.
think we're from that same school
Yeah,
of thought where it's like if you see somebody who needs help or has a valuable lesson or message, why not? I mean, our communities need more of that. So if I can help amplify somebody else's message, I'm all for it.
right, right. And I did look at your YouTube channel, and I did, watch some of your videos before I recommended, just so I could get an understanding of the flow. And I was just impressed top to bottom with everything that I saw. So that obviously helped. And I just thought, I'm not necessarily an avid reader, but when I do read, I engross myself in the books that I do read. And they can run the gamut from biographies to, lately I've been doing more self-help, personal development type books, but it can run the gamut. But when I decide to read a book, I'm reading the book.
Yeah. No, and we'll get into the books that we're going to cover here and I think I find in these conversations, even if we're focused on one book, another book that comes to mind always is brought up. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of that today.
Yeah.
But Edie, as we start, why don't you tell us a little more about who you are? I read your bio, obviously, but what does your day to day look like? What is it that you do for your clients? Because what stood out to me, let me just go back to your bio real quick.
Mhm.
Um, what stood out to me was the part where you say service based entrepreneurs. Um, and there was something that stood out that I'll look for that keyword, but there was just something about that stood out about who you were trying to help. But in the
Mhm.
meantime, why don't you just tell me a little bit about the work, what it looks like day in and day out for you?
Yeah. It varies from client to client. For some clients, they'll work with me one-on-one because they want consultation or coaching on how to achieve a specific result. So a lot of my clients are service-based entrepreneurs. So they're coaches, they're trainers. They provide a service to their client. And a lot of those clients tend to not necessarily know exactly how they can promote themselves and their services using video. And as we know, video is the main process by which people will be able to get to know, like, and trust you faster than any other medium because they get to see what your personality is. They get to hear you. They understand who you are by your presence that you display on your videos. And there's usually a couple of different camps with people where some are like, yes, I get it. I understand the impact that video can have. My problem is I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I don't know what to do once I've created the videos. And then you have another camp where it's not necessarily that they're old school, but they're used to the text and the images that they can post on social media, and they're comfortable in that camp. Maybe it's because they're naturally writers, or maybe they're naturally people that like to read and write things. So therefore, that medium is going to come more natural to them. There also could be people that maybe aren't really comfortable being on camera. They're not necessarily, fans of the way that they look. And so they tend to avoid it. But I try to embrace everybody into, or bring everyone in to embracing video and YouTube because of the benefits that it can have. And I can relate to both camps because even though I do video, I'm not extremely comfortable on video, but it was something that I needed to adapt to in order for me to be able to market myself and my services. So I'll work with clients that want me to sort of virtually hold their hands through the process. Everything from what do I do, how do I do it, to what do I do once the video is done. Then I'll have
Awesome.
clients that may be, I get it, I want to use it, but I don't want to have anything to do with it or very little in terms of my day to day. And in those instances, I'll use my remote video services where they'll come up with the concept of what they're going to create. They're the experts, so they're going to know what it is that they need to say. We will then get together and I will film them remotely, and then my team and I will edit those videos and manage their YouTube channel if that's what the purpose of the videos is for. Then I have other clients that may only want me to do one piece of what they're doing. So maybe they're good with creating the videos, but they're not that great with editing. So my team can edit the videos for them or repurpose their existing videos into shorts or social media videos. So it all depends on what specifically the client wants.
Edie, to understand the work you're doing now, or maybe not, just because everybody's path to where they are now is just so
Mhm.
different. It's so zigzag. It's
Yeah,
never linear.
yeah.
But what was it that got you started off working
Mhm.
towards a career, whether it was this one or something else? Was it family? Was it circumstance? What was it? Was it going to school? Was it inspiration from somebody in your family or amongst
Right.
your circles before college? If you went to college, what was it that got you started on the path of your career?
Well, that actually started when I was right out of high school and I was deciding on what I was going to major in. And I realized that I was obsessed with television programming to the point where I would look at TV shows, particularly the ones I was obsessed with, a lot of educational kind of based TV shows that were on like PBS back in the day when I was growing up. And I was so obsessed with it that I would write synopsis of each episode of my favorite shows that were on PBS. And then I would come up with my own sort of version of that type of show. But I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that that meant that I was interested in entertainment or that I wanted to work in video and television production. Didn't understand that until I started looking at college catalogs and then started to realize, oh, there's this thing called radio and television production, kind of a thing. So it started from then, and I had the fortune from right out of high school of getting an internship at a local TV station where I grew up, and I grew up in the US Virgin Islands. And so I did that for a year. That then turned into freelance work as a casting assistant because they used to do a lot of Hollywood productions in the Virgin Islands, whether it's commercials or like TV shows and
Mhm.
pilots and episodes and things of that nature. Then I left with the intention of going off to school in New York, which is where I live now, and then realized I don't need to go to school for this. I already know what I need to know. So I ended up just going to like a technical school instead of college. I gotten accepted, but I just didn't go. And I went to the technical school. From there, I worked in post production for a number of years. And then I moved to California because I wanted to do something more on the production side as opposed to post production. And while I was there, I worked as an assistant to a film producer and director. I worked at a couple of other production companies doing production coordinating work. And then I worked at Sony Pictures Imageworks, which is the visual effects division of Sony Pictures. And then when I came back to New York, I ended up coming out of that area or that sort of career for a while. And then I started a production company with my husband. I was now married by this time. And we just did commercials for local businesses in Brooklyn that were going to be broadcast on cable. And then I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. I'd gotten pregnant, had a child, and just wanted to stay home for a while. And then when I re entered the workforce, I ended up working in an administrative position at a real estate company, which after about 2 years, I hated and had to leave. And I quit without a job and didn't know what I was going to do. Ended up hiring a coach. That coach basically said, your love is video. Why are you not doing video? And because I came from a world where you worked at a post-production company, a production company, a film company, it never occurred to me that it was something I could do from home. And so that's when I started my business. And initially, it started as just editing videos. YouTube was out, but I didn't really understand YouTube or think that it was something that businesses used or needed. And a couple of years later, I then realized the impact that YouTube had. And then I started to learn YouTube and incorporate that into the services that I offer to my clients.
So what do you think it was? And that's a great story. I love that.
Thank
What
you.
do you think it was when you were a kid and you would watch a show and you would want to do
Mm.
that synopsis? What, even tracing that back, if you could, was it just because when you said later you realized you read through college catalogs and you learned about production and radio and video and all that, so you learned that there was something, that it wasn't just magic coming to
Right,
our
right.
TVs, right?
Yeah.
um but how old were you when you were doing that? I'm curious, like, what it was that drove you. Was it just you had a big imagination as a kid? Was it that you liked messaging? Was it somebody
Good
in your
question.
circles that was very organized about messaging? What, I'm curious if you know. You don't have to rack your brain, but if you know what it
Honest,
is that.
yeah. Honestly, I don't know. I was moved by the programming that I would see. And I was not necessarily, I didn't look at a TV show and then say, well, how did they put that together? That wasn't what would come to my mind. It was, I was moved by the stories. I was engrossed by the stories. I really wanted to meet the characters. I was very, very much a fan of the shows and thought that they were brilliantly done. And I only did that, believe it or not, for the PBS shows. I did not do that on regular network. Now, back when I was in high school, um, there weren't a lot of, there wasn't cable in the way that we know. And obviously, there was no streaming. So I didn't have hundreds or thousands of shows to watch. And I grew up in the Virgin Islands. So we had very limited access to television shows. I think we had PBS, we had ABC, and then we had sort of a mix between CBS and NBC. And that was it. And I didn't do it for the shows that were on the networks. I only did it for the shows that were on PBS. And I didn't do it for like the kids shows like Electric Company and Sesame Street. I didn't do it for that. I did it for sitcoms or dramas that PBS back then when I was growing up had really, I mean, they still have great content to this day. But those were the shows that really grabbed me. I didn't know of anybody that did this as a career, so it wasn't something that I saw or witnessed. It was just something that I was moved to do.
What shows are we talking about?
They were shows, the one was called Up and Coming, and that show actually, if you are familiar with the group In Vogue,
Hmm.
the lead singer was on that show as a regular. So I knew of her before she was singing. She was an actress the first time I had ever heard of her. There was another show called Righteous Apples. I'm so dating myself when I say
Yeah,
this.
I've not. Edie, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
I've never heard of
I
any
know,
of any of these
I
shows.
know,
Okay,
I
I'm
know,
not judging. I'm not
I know.
judging. Go on. Go
It's
on.
okay. And I'm glad that they existed when I was growing up
Oh,
because that's
absolutely,
the thing that made me love production and
absolutely.
love the creation aspect of it. And then there was a third show called The New Voice. And they were all sort of, these were all, well, Up and Coming was sort of like a comedy drama, and the other two were dramas. And they were all at the age that I was at, about high school. They were all sort of set in that sort of era of people going through high school, but they were dealing with real world things like teenage pregnancy and drug abuse, because that's been around forever. So it just, it grabbed me in that it was so timely, the topics that they were talking about, and then the acting was brilliant, and just the way that they chose to deal with the situations was really well done. They were really well done shows that really moved me and motivated me to want to do things similar to that.
Yeah, it's amazing that you came across those particular shows,
Mhm.
because what if it wasn't those shows? What if those shows weren't available?
Yeah,
Maybe something might have grabbed you, but these seem to really have made an impact. The storytelling stood out, the
yeah,
acting, whatever it was. You're lucky that these particular ones were out, because obviously look where you are now. I mean,
yeah,
they're a major part of that foundation.
yeah, for sure.
Uh, Edie, before we jump into the book, I'm always curious, obviously, leadership coach. What does leadership mean to you?
Leadership, I think, is being able to, by example, showcase what it is that you do and how you help others be better and do better. Um, I don't think I've ever considered myself a leader for a really long time. I never really thought of myself as that, but I do recognize that I do have leadership capabilities and qualities within the realm of what I do, because I am, especially in the consulting aspect of what I do, and that also sort of, being a consultant is sort of the equivalent of being a producer in television or film. And it's the person that sort of has that 30,000-foot view of everything, and they're able to guide the production or guide
Mhm.
the client through the process of getting from where they are to where they want to be. And I do that well. And so as the years have progressed, as I've done what I've done, I do see myself as a leader in what I do for my clients, for sure.
Thank you. And typically, the question that I ask right before that one is, if you could, looking back at your childhood, does it make
Mhm.
sense that you are where you are right now? To me, for you, it
Yeah,
does seem like it, but
yeah,
what do you think about that? Is
yeah.
it just
Yeah, I think it does, and it's, I've said this to my son on countless occasions, not trying to put any pressure on him because he's about to graduate college, um, in May. I was like,
Mm,
"When is he graduating?"
congrats, congrats.
Yeah, thank you. It's, I'm one of the rare people that I've ever met in my group of family and friends where what I wanted to do when I was a teenager is what I still desire today. Almost everyone I know is doing something completely different than what they either fantasized as a kid or what they went to college for. And so I do believe that I am where I'm supposed to be. And I'm even getting closer to other things, because besides what I do for my clients, I actually also am working on a animated movie that I'm in the process of writing. So I'm still doing the entertainment aspect of that as well.
Awesome. You mentioned your son and that you told him. What did you tell him? Was there advice, a piece of advice? What did you tell him?
Well, the main thing that I wanted him to understand is that the purpose for going to college was not necessarily to get a degree. And I know probably people will scream and, like, I don't know what they'll say. But I felt that it was a proof that you completed something, that you made up
Mm,
your mind, you decided that you were going to do something and you were able to complete it, because he does not really know what he wants to do. And I just wanted him to be able to, A, do something that I didn't do, which was finish school, and just have the experience of being able to be on a campus, to navigate life those first 4 years out of high school, and to be able to achieve a goal that he set for himself 4 years earlier. I did not really care what degree he had. And I don't think that it really, at the end of the day, matters, unless you obviously want to be a lawyer or a doctor, or maybe an
yeah,
engineer as well.
yeah.
But if you don't have a specific goal like that, I don't think that it really matters. It just is proof that you've been able to complete something. You have, especially nowadays in the way that they're teaching you, they're giving you a lot of real world experience where you understand what it's like to collaborate with people, to lead projects, to do all of the things that I didn't know how long it would take him to do in the real world. So if he could get all of those lessons truncated down into 4 years, then that's all that was really important to me. And once he's finished, then he can experiment and see what he wants to do.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that in terms of, yeah, if you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, something very technical like that, fine.
Right.
But I'm of the mindset that, and listen, this is somebody, I'm somebody, I went for a bachelor's degree, two master's degrees, but the lesson you gave him is like more powerful than any degree, because it is about what he wants to do and just saying, this is a likely path or this is a path, giving him options and understanding.
Right.
But um yeah, I think the landscape of college is going to change. I'm hoping so by the time my three kids are college age, because I don't want to pay college prices. But
Right. I hear you.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
All right, Edie, now we can jump into the books. You said you wanted to cover 2 books, so why don't we
Yes.
do this? Why don't you give the titles that you want to cover and then just kind of explain how you came across the first book. Then we can go into the lessons of that, and then we'll dive into the second book.
Okay. So the first book is Hello Fears. And this book I found in 2021. It was probably around September of 2021. And it was a crisis moment that I was experiencing at the time. I had been suffering from imposter syndrome and just having issues with believing in my own capabilities. And I had gotten to a point that summer where I probably had like a panic attack or something close to that, to the point where I realized it was a recurring issue that I had and I needed to address it. So I started to figure out what did I need to do in order to address it. So I went out and started seeking a therapist. I got myself a business mentor some months later. And I don't really remember. I've been struggling to try to remember exactly how I found this book. I don't know if I did a Google search or if I was searching on, I'm a huge Audible fan. So I don't know if it came across my path that way, but somehow this book dropped itself in my path, and it was beyond helpful to me because it really allowed me to recognize and identify that the root cause of what I was dealing with was fear. And I didn't know what to do with it. And every time I would go through a process and I would become fearful, I would shift and go in a different direction so that I could avoid whatever it was that I was fearing. And so when I read this book just sort of made me A, recognize that it was fear, and then B, allowed me to recognize too that I could overcome my fear, because my fear really wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it was huge to me, but to a lot of other people, it probably wasn't as big of a deal. And I didn't encounter the fears or deal with the fears that she dealt with in her book. And the she I'm referring to is Michelle Poler.
What's the Edie? What's the subtitle on that book?
It's Crush Your Comfort Zone and Become the You.
Okay.
Become who you're meant to be. Sorry.
No worries.
And so with what she basically did, just to kind of give you a overview of the book, is she was tasked with a project while she was in college by her professor. And they needed to figure out what this one thing was that they were going to do for 100 straight days. So it's called the 100-Day Project. And, people would do, oh, I'm going to do 100 days of being grateful, or I'm going to do 100 days of, whatever. And so she chose to do the one thing that was really blocking her, and that was address her fears. So she was going to come up with 100 different fears that she was going to deal with every single day for 100 days. That is beyond bold and brave. I don't think I could do that. So in reading this and seeing what she was doing to figure out what fear she was going to do, how she was going to attack it, and then to overcome that fear by actually doing the thing. And they ran the gamut in terms of the types of fears that she had. I think she even had something as minor as like, a fear of hot sauce, but they could be major as a fear of jumping out of a plane or walking down the street naked. I mean, they ran the gamut. And so I wouldn't do that, but it just made me realize that my fear really was small in the grand scheme of things, and I needed to make myself uncomfortable. I had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order for me to address my fear. So that was a huge learning lesson. And like I mentioned before, I'm an Audible person. So I listened to the book not once, but twice
Wow. Oh,
on
and then you went and
Audible.
got it.
And then I bought the book. And so I'm still, every now and again, I'll go through it because the book is almost like a workbook as well. There are things that you can, fill out, like you have to address the 7 fears and put them in order of, what's the worst fear versus the least thing that you're fearful of. So it's a really good book and process that I used in order to address, identify, and deal with my fear.
How is the book structured? Well, you gave an overview, but what do the chapters look like, Edie?
Um, if I remember correct, I'm going to go back. She has them, she's literally sort of addressing the different types of fears. Like chapter 1 is hello life. So she's saying hello fears is like a letter that she's writing to her fears. And because it's hello, comma, fears.
Oh, okay.
And so the first chapter is hello life. So it's all about addressing the fears that you deal with in your day-to-day life. Then she might have one that's called hello brave, being brave. Then she has another one, just had the chapter points. Hello society, hello you, which is all about becoming your authentic you. Hello haters, that's about allowing yourself, which is another thing that a lot of my clients tend to fear when it comes to video, is the haters that they'll encounter. And they're gonna be haters, and you
Mhm.
just have to basically embrace that fear and deal with it and move through it. Hello ego, hello heck no, heck yes, hello future, hello success, hello growth. So she sort of categorizes it, and it is a sort of a journey that she's taking you on in order for you to address all of the different types of fears that you would have, and then how to, how she achieved them and got past them.
In reading the book and seeing what she did, you don't have to go into them, but did you try to come up with a list of different fears, or you couldn't put a face to it or a label to it, so you had to use the book to discover it?
Um,
Did you
I
did you experiment at all with what she tried to do?
I tried to do that, but I kept mine. Hers were personal and professional fears. My fears, I think, were more professional. So I tried to address them from more of a professional perspective. So one of the fears that I had is of doing live events. So I said, I'm not, the next time or any time that someone approaches me to do a live event, I'm not going to immediately say no, which is what I used to do. And so I just actually came back a week ago, Sunday, from a live event that I was at for 3 days that I spoke at. Um, another fear that I have is of networking. I'm not usually someone that is comfortable in introducing myself to new people and, sort of chit-chatting. That's not, something that I'm used to. So I'm putting myself in positions where I'm able to do that a little bit more. So there were things like that I did, but, I don't know if there were, I would never walk down the street naked. That's just not interested,
Yeah,
not
and
not
you
willing
have to
to.
think about it. If the challenge was 100, I mean, could any
do.
of us really think of 100
I
fears that
know,
we have? I mean,
I know.
so she's really stretching it.
Yeah,
I
she
mean,
totally stretched herself. I think even to the point where, because she documented this on her YouTube channel that she had at the time, and this blew up to the point where she ended up doing a TED Talk. That was the culmination, and I think that might have been one of her goals too, was to ultimately end up doing that. But she was documenting it, and she was using social media to ask people to give her advice on different things that she could do. Because you're right, to sit down and come up with 100 things, that's That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I think in your everyday, maybe we have a lot of apprehension. We know we have fears. We know sometimes our confidence is lacking. But then, like you've talked about, putting a label on it, it's so weird. I just can't imagine listing out that many just
Yeah.
because we're in cruise control and we're always
Right.
tentative.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't come up with 100, and even if I did, say, for instance, say, "Okay, I got motivation from this, I'm gonna do the 100 that she did," there were no, I have no interest in
yeah,
doing that.
yeah. I mean, the walking down the street, I think that's more embarrassing than
Yeah,
fear. I don't know.
yeah.
What are some major fears you have now then, Edie?
Um, I was actually having this conversation with my accountability group, and I was like, because they were talking about, like, the fear of being on stage, and it's like, that isn't a fear that I have. I may get nervous leading up to it, but being on the stage doesn't scare me. Like, I've never gotten stage fright in my life. But it's the fear that I used to have, and I'm really working, and I'm saying used to because I'm still working on getting over it, is the fear of not being accepted. And that is something that I'm working on because that has more to do with how I perceive other people receiving me as opposed to
Mm.
me owning it and really projecting and being who I am naturally. And so that is probably one of the fears that I still am regularly dealing with. Other than that, a fear, I'm thinking business wise, but I probably should think personal as well.
I
And
mean, you don't even have to. I was just curious,
yeah,
how it changes your outlook. What do you consider fear? What's the threshold for fear? Again, like walking down the street naked, embarrassing. Would I
right,
want to do it? Not really. I
right,
mean, if I wanted to push myself, I wouldn't call it fear, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
so fear is so subjective, but
Yeah, it is. It
but
is.
I love what you're sharing about putting yourself out there for other people, the acceptance of other
Right.
people.
Yeah.
So
That
how do
I
you
think
view
has
it though? Because
always been a fear.
I've seen you, since we connected on LinkedIn, I've seen you. I've attended some of your events,
Mhm.
some live events. I've seen some of your recordings. Like, so how do you? What kind of mindset? And you've mentioned, and here's where we relate. Like being on stage doesn't scare me anymore. It
Yeah.
used to,
Right.
but I still feel that
Mhm.
nervousness before. I think it's our primitive mind. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just the way we are.
Yeah.
Um, but I get up on stage or whatever it may be, a minute or two, if that, it's gone.
Right. Right. Mm.
Um, so now when you have those moments where you may have those fears, where you maybe feel those tinges of imposter syndrome or what might people think, how do you deal with that? What's that internal conversation that you have with yourself that lets you get through it? Or is it more like, okay, I know it's that feeling is there, but it's negligible. Like I just
Right.
I can't. I can't I can't put up with that shit now. I
Right.
I
Right.
gotta do the thing. Like what does that conversation for you look like? Especially with somebody like yourself
Right.
that does a lot of video. You're not just producing for other people, you're hosting events and
Right.
whatnot.
Believe it or not, the book, my second book, helped with that. And
Nice
so it's
segue. That wasn't
practical.
even
I
planned.
know. I know. Practical Law of Attraction by Victoria M. Gallagher. And the subtitle on this is Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires. Um, she teaches about visualization, which I'm still working on, but more importantly, the law of detachment, detaching yourself from the end result. That
Mm.
was something that I lacked like you would not believe. And so when I would know that I was going to do, say, for example, a live stream or a live event in person, it was important for me to learn how to detach myself from whatever the end result of that event was going to be. So if the assumption was I'm going to do this presentation, at the end of the presentation, I'm going to have a call to action for a new service that I'm offering. The old Edie would obsess over it needing to be perfect. It has to flow a certain way. I need to be able to segue into the call to action so that I can encourage people to purchase my services and or my product. And if I didn't get anyone, it was crushing. It was devastating. I sucked. Why did I do this? I should have done that. All of this would be going on in my
Mm,
head. And what her book taught me was that I needed to detach myself from whatever I thought or wanted the end result to be. I could not focus on that. I needed to be in the moment and be present. And I needed to learn, and this is the part that I'm still working on, the visualization aspect of it, where I could just visualize myself just going through the experience and being content with getting through it.
mm,
Don't worry about the end result. Like the event that I spoke at last week, my goal was put on a presentation where it was going to be informative, it was going to be educational. People were going to walk away knowing and learning something that they didn't know before they came to see me. I didn't focus on how many people were going to be in the audience or how many people were going to be on the live stream because it was being streamed live. I just focused on giving it my all. And whatever the end result was, it was. But I wanted to be there for the experience of it. And so that was what goes through my head, is that I just focus on putting out content that is going to be helpful and informational and educational. And don't worry about, well, are they going to buy? Are they not going to buy? Why didn't they buy? I should have done this differently. Just detach yourself completely
yeah. And
from
that's
it.
not to say that you're compromising value, quality in your work at all. I
Right,
don't want anybody to get that idea that it
right,
just means, whatever happens, happens.
right.
No, it means you're still putting in that work
Yes,
110% leading up to it.
yes.
And I love that message because I think, what was it that got me? I have a similar mindset
Mhm.
where it's kind of, I think it was maybe Seth Godin in a talk that he gave online. And maybe it had to do with his blog posts and turning off messages where people couldn't comment. And he said
Mm.
something to the effect of, what does it matter? And again, this segue,
Right,
this interaction right here, this wasn't planned, but it
right.
fits in perfectly. It's like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the best work I can. I want to share it with an audience, my audience, whoever wants to listen. And I'm paraphrasing.
Mhm.
What does it matter what people think? If I'm giving it my best, it doesn't really matter what they think. And you preface that with saying we got to make a living. Obviously, you want to
Right,
attract people to your
right,
packages, your
right,
services.
right,
Yes, we get that. That's going to come through in the quality of the work. But
right.
that when I heard him say that, I'm like, oh my God. Because I think so many people do attach to those results. What will happen? And
Mhm.
I'm somebody that's dealt with, like you said, imposter syndrome. I think we all do. I think
Right.
it keeps us alive. It's like one of those, primitive reactions where what will a tribe that I can belong to think?
Right.
Like, I want this tribe to accept me. What are they going to? It is important. But we've done that for so long, constricting ourselves because the energy to fight off that fear, that
Mhm.
concern, that tension is energy that we can be putting into our product, service,
Yeah.
presentation, whatever it may be. So I love that you brought that up because I don't think it's a message that has necessarily been shared here in how to look at what you're communicating to other people, but get yourself out there. So that's what I took away from Seth Godin, that just that one comment. I don't
Mhm.
need the comments because I got to do the work anyway.
Yeah.
And people always ask me why I'm always writing so much because I have to get these ideas out there. Like, that's why I enjoy this kind of thing.
Mhm.
A couple years ago, pre-pandemic, I probably wouldn't do this. I wouldn't want to
Right.
be on video. I
Right.
want, not live, but obviously we're capturing everything that's being shared.
Right.
I trickled into it through the pandemic, volunteering to host events online for the American Marketing Association.
Mm.
And then when I rotated off of that, I was kind of like, damn, I enjoyed that
Right.
interaction with people, like
Yeah.
pulling value, sharing value.
Right.
And and the funny thing is, it plays into this as well, Edie, is that I always say that I'm an introvert. And people are like, bullshit. you can't be writing as much, putting as much out there, sharing, speaking, and doing this if you're an
Mhm.
introvert. It's like, no, like the passion for the work, like
Right.
I need to get that out of me, because what's worse than somebody saying they don't like it is the regret that I'll have down the road if I didn't do it.
Do it.
That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And it's interesting that you talk about the pandemic bringing people sort of out into the open, if you will, because that is definitely what's making people a little bit more comfortable on camera is the fact that everybody has to do Zoom calls nowadays, or whether it's for work or they've joined online networking opportunities, and that made them a little bit more comfortable on camera, even though there are some people that will still do those things and just have the camera off. But for the most part, it definitely has brought people, and I'm glad that I'm not glad that the pandemic happened, but I'm
Yeah.
certainly glad that it made people like you be comfortable doing video, that now you're continuing to do it because, pre-pandemic, it was like twisting people's arms to tell them you need to do video. And it just,
Oh
I
yeah.
got so many, I'm not doing it. I'm fine with just writing blogs. And I would say it would impact the amount of time that people stay on your website if you embed a video on your blog, or, nobody would, they were like, hit and miss if you were lucky to get people to see it. And I think if I had had a conversation with you pre-pandemic, you probably would have been like, nah, I'm good.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I would have been like, Edie, I'll just pour everything I can into blogs.
right,
Listen, I'll put 4 blogs out a day. I don't need, yeah.
right,
Um,
right.
more from fear, from comfort. I mean, obviously, like you said, if we were going through training, being on Zoom for work and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's amazing how now I can't envision not doing this.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
I can't envision not doing this because I've gotten so comfortable and I'm curious about my network. I really am genuinely curious about people's backgrounds and the books that they're sharing. So it's amazing how that shifted. Again, like you said, and it's been mentioned in here before, the pandemic is just a silver lining of the pandemic
Totally.
is much the self reflection, the self assessment, the self awareness that most of us picked up.
Yeah. And along with that, all of the different platforms, because I mean, obviously, YouTube's been around for, since like 2005, 2006. And it was not something that people were using for business purposes. They didn't start until like maybe 2008, 2009. A lot of businesses started to use it. And by like 2013, 2014, it was definitely the place to be if you wanted to exponentially grow your business. I didn't really start to embrace it until like 2014, 15, 16, so sort of around in that time frame. But it definitely is constantly improving and getting better. And nowadays, it is really great for video podcasts like yours because they have their own standalone page for YouTube. It's youtube.com/podcast. And they've actually, I think it started now already, where you can get podcasts on YouTube Music, so you can have just the audio on YouTube Music as your podcast. And it's just making people more accessible. It's making your content more accessible to a wider range of people, because I don't know how true this statistic is, but I saw a statistic recently because I'm now offering video podcast production. And so I was doing a little bit of research, trying to see what some of the stats were. And according to, I forgot what website this was, I have it documented somewhere. But behind Spotify ranks YouTube in terms of the views where video podcasts are being seen, because Spotify does allow, and I think it's probably due to Joe Rogan,
Mm.
allows for video podcasts. But YouTube ranks second behind that. And then the third came in for Apple Podcasts. So it's growing in terms of the number of people that are using it to listen and watch podcasts. So that I found really interesting as well. So you're certainly ahead of the curve because you already are on YouTube and you have a very good podcast. And so I think because this, what you do is unique. I've not seen this a lot. I've seen people do book reviews. That I've seen like a bajillion times where people will be like, these are the 5 books that I've read. And then they tell you what the reviews are. But this is different. This is definitely deeper. It's a deeper connection that people can have in terms of understanding why they should probably go out and read a book, or maybe they need to reread a book because the person that was your guest had a different take on it or something like that. So this definitely is a different take on just having a conversation about books. So,
And I appreciate that. I mean, and listen, there was a nervousness to starting it, and then it's evolved into so much more. I look at it was a passion project. Now it's kind of like I've had guests say to me afterwards, like, I've never talked about that before. I've never
yeah,
brought that up. No one's
yeah,
asked me that question
yeah,
before. Like, wow, that's more than they just thought it was gonna be like a sit and chat, like quick question, quick
right.
answer, quick question. And what's great is like you can do something that's long form because we have, apps on our phone where you can just pause it in the shower and then listen,
Mhm.
pick it back up in the car. So I don't try to go too long, but I definitely want to capture my guest's story, what they're about. And, because the series started with books, obviously we dive into that as well. So thank you for all that information,
Oh, you're
Edie. And I
welcome.
appreciate what you shared about my show. So what with the second book, the one you just shared,
Mhm.
what is that structured like? What kind of path does she take the reader through to get to that point where they're visualizing when it comes to moments of fear or where they're
Right.
lacking their own bravery, whatever it might be? What does that look like, the book?
Right. Well, I read this book about 3 months after Hello Fears, and I, was recommended this book was recommended to me by my therapist, who happens to be a really good friend of the author. And it was based on a conversation that I had where I don't know if we were necessarily talking about fears, but it was definitely imposter syndrome was something that was being talked about, and just all of the issues that I had with regards to um, presenting myself online. And, yes, I'm comfortable doing videos and things of that nature, but there's still a lot of hidden stuff behind the scenes that I needed to deal with. I had read, did I read it? Yeah, I had read The Secret eons ago and thought it was all BS. And it was because of the way that that was written and presented. Now, it worked for some people. I know that they were all on Oprah and was this big, whatever. But what Victoria does is she almost goes in and dissects manifestation and the laws of attraction. And she just doesn't say, oh, you just need to go out there and wish for these things and repeat things over and over in your mantras, and you're going to get it.
Mhm.
She really breaks it down in a way that it had never been broken down for me before. So I got to understand what all of the laws were. Like, she doesn't deal with every single law. I think she covers 3 laws in her book. And then she breaks it down even beyond that, where she is talking about how your mind should be thinking, like the mind. I think she calls them mind models. And one of the models that I think she addresses, I think Zig Ziglar focuses on, which is the be, do, have
Mhm.
model, which is usually um, not necessarily the way that we think. She says, and he says, you need to believe in something, then you need to do it in order for you to have it. As opposed to, I think there's a saying out there like seeing is believing. You can't wait. Belief shouldn't be the last thing. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in whatever it is that you want to do before you can have it. So need to be, do, have is that model, which I'd never thought of. And when it was broken down and explained, I was like, oh my God, yeah. If I don't believe in it, how in God's name am I going to get it? It's not going to. And then I have to take out the action part I always knew about, but I didn't realize that I needed to first believe in it. Then I had to take action in order for me to have what it was that I wanted.
Isn't
And
it amazing how like the best lessons are just the most simple phrases? Like that's what I've learned in my old age is just like the most powerful um just saviors,
yeah,
life-saving ideas are
yeah,
like so simple.
yeah,
It's beautiful and frustrating at the
yeah,
same time.
exactly. I was like, where was this book all my life? Because
Yeah, I
I had
mean,
read it before. And then she goes into two other or three other areas. I think one is conditions. So those are relating to like your desires and your thoughts. And she breaks down what they mean and how you need to implement them in your life. And this was also another book that had worksheets that went along with it. So you had to go to her website and download all of these worksheets that you could fill out in order for you to go through the process. So both of these books were sort of like almost like textbooks where they had you go through the action of doing something in order for you to really grasp what it was. So it wasn't just, random reading and, oh, okay, I'll remember that. It was actual doing as well. And then she talked about all of the different qualities, which that part was, when I got to that, I was like, well, what does this have to do with anything? Because it was things like your attitude, being aware, balance, and things of that nature. And I'm like, what does that have to do with the law of attraction and being able to manifest things? But then when she goes into each one of them, you're like I realized one of the aha moments I had was, I think, in attitude. And it was literally, what is your overall attitude of life, of everything that you do? And I was one of those people that prided myself on being a realist. And when you really think of it, a realist is someone that sees a glass half full or half empty, sorry, as opposed to half full. And so I needed to recognize that I needed to change my outlook, my attitude on how I saw things. And that was something that I didn't even, prior to this book, would have thought that I needed to adjust. I just thought, okay, I kind of sort of occasionally have a positive attitude. That's all I need. And would go on my way. Yeah. And it was more, she dissected things so deeply that it then made me, in every single condition or quality that she identified. At first, when you look at it, you're like, well, what the heck does that have to do with manifesting or laws of attraction? And then when she explains it and explains how it affects your life, you're then, oh my God. So this is a book that I constantly am going back to, constantly. And I was so obsessed with this book that I started to follow her on social media. I ended up joining a challenge that she had at the beginning of last year. And then I ended up joining a mastermind because she just was so, everything that I was learning was so helpful, and it was allowing me to recognize the things that I wasn't doing and why I was having all of these blocks and why I was feeling the way that I was feeling. So it really, both books were instrumental together. I think it made sense that I read Hello Fears and then Practical Law of Attraction. I needed both of them at
Mhm.
the time, and they just helped me, and they're still helping me because occasionally I'll go back if I have a block.
Yeah, it's amazing how I think you may pick up that book thinking manifesting. Okay, so it's from my front door outward. It's out there that needs to happen. And then she's like, "Okay, let's ask about you, like your attitude, your belief." You're like, "Wait. I thought we were going outward."
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think so much of that, and I mean, maybe she gets into that book is just those little tools, those little things like
Mhm.
setting the stage. It's like when they say, I'm sorry, it escapes me the phrase about luck and opportunity, and what luck is just kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
being ready.
Yeah. I forgot. Yeah, it's a cool quote, but I can't think of it.
Yeah, I think I think what that book is saying is, yeah, you really do have to focus and set the stage properly.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us go through life in reactive mode.
Mhm.
that very rarely do we turn inward and say, okay, is that still working? Is that where it's supposed
Right.
to be? Is that how I should feel? Is that how I should perceive the outside world?
Yeah. Yeah. And then she even has you create what she calls desire statements. So you're really just putting out there what it is that you want. And there are mantras that you need to articulate. But one of the parts of that is expressing gratitude in the things that you already have. And that is vitally important because a lot of us, and I know I'm going to admit I was this way. I never sat down and truly appreciated and certainly never wrote the things that I was grateful for. And they could be really big things or they can be really small things. And in fact, I think the smaller things are even probably more consequential. But it's just a process that you need to go through in terms of the way that you think and what it is that you want out of life. And really, if you follow that model of be, do, have, it really does truly work. Because I've seen it work in others that were in the mastermind, and I've seen it work for myself. So it was really good.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, you didn't have to get too detailed or specific, but if you had seen how much you had seen turn around for you, or not even turn around, but improve
Mhm.
in what you wanted to achieve, and then getting after it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely in the example of the event that I went to, I, was making sure that my main focus with besides putting together a really helpful and informative presentation was to detach from the outcome of whatever it was going to be. So I was, if I get sales, great. If I don't get sales, it's all about the experience of being able to do this, being able to help people. What am I going to My takeaways need to be, how can I improve? Period. End of
Yes.
discussion.
Yes.
And I ended up getting sales as well as figuring out what areas I needed to improve on. And now I'm going to package that and do that as a LinkedIn live in a couple of weeks, because one of my goals, this was a fear goal. One of my goals for 2023 was that I wanted to do live events, streaming live events on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. And my goal is to do twice a month. And so far, each month I've done twice. I'm now in April and I need to get my act in gear because next week I need to do a live, but I plan on doing two lives, which will be on the presentation that I did in Michigan last week.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how you seem to find the books when you needed them, and that,
Mhm.
they were seemingly exactly the kind of tools that you needed for yourself.
Yeah. And I think all of that is, back to this, everything happens for a reason. And it happens at the time that you need it. And you actually see it to sort of do it when it's right for you. Because someone could tell you, oh, Edie, you need to do this, or oh, John, this is what you need to do. But if you can't see it, then it's not, you're just going to ignore it. So whenever that time is right for you, whether that's a week later, a month later, or years later, that's when it's going to be right for you. And some of the things that I learned in both of these books, I may have been aware of, but it wasn't the right time for me to
Mm.
do it. I needed to experience the things that I've experienced prior to reading this book in order for me to get it and in order for me to apply the things that I needed to apply. And I think that's how it is for everyone.
Yeah, that's what's come across in several of my conversations, is just when they found what was right for them, or they hit the right stride or the right energy, it was after years or maybe months of just hardships, or some
Mhm.
people hitting rock bottom.
Right.
So it's amazing, as much as we want to impart lessons on our kids, we can kind of guide them down the way of thinking. They're going to have to go through their own shit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The
Yep.
best you can do is say, "Listen, what you see is not law. Um, you can impact it. You can do your due diligence. You can do the best you can. you can kind of be there for them to fall back on. But as much of that advice, as much as maybe your kid, or I mean, my kids are too young, but might hear this conversation, it's not going to click until
Yep.
they need
Yep.
that the
Yep.
most.
And that's what I've said to my husband in reference to our son. We can't take him by the hand and say, do this, do that. He has to experience life on his path. We can advise him because I think growing up or raising him, we were obsessed with, you cannot make the same mistakes we made. So you need to avoid this, this, and this. But that's not his life. His life
Yeah.
is to make his own mistakes. And some of them may be similar to the ones that we've made. But the hope and prayer is that by experiencing them, he won't repeat them multiple times throughout his life, but hopefully it'll just be just one time and he'll learn it and move on. But that's not the reality either, because I know for myself, and I think I'm a fast learner, I have experienced, failures or hardship or what have you, and said mentally, okay, I'm not going to do this again. And then years go by, same type of situation, and I'm back in the same because of whatever. And usually in that instance, it's that I don't listen to that inner voice sometimes, which is so crucial. And sometimes I've been like, well, can I hear it really? And I can. I do know when my inner voice is speaking. I just, for a really long time, didn't trust it. I trusted it when I was younger. And then I got to a certain age and I stopped listening to it and I stopped trusting it. And now I'm trying to get back to trusting my gut and that inner voice. And everyone has that. And it's up to us to decide whether it's going to be a voice that we're going to allow ourselves to hear, or if we're going to keep saying no to it. But if you listen to your gut truly never fails you, ever. And so that's the thing that we need to make sure that we're doing.
So much great information and lessons covered. But it's like, yeah, we all have that similar story where it's just a lifetime of challenges and obstacles. And it would we be better off if it was so much easier from the get go? You know what I mean? I was talking to somebody just yesterday about that they found their calling. I think it might have been Allie.
Mm,
So it was last week. There's my memory again. But where she found her calling. She finally kind of the same thing you were talking about, the way that you put it, Edie, where she had this kind of voice, right, that was always there, but she was like, no, society said I needed to go this
yeah.
way.
Yeah, that
Meanwhile,
is
this
how.
other voice is like, right.
Yeah.
Um, but we talked about how by the time you do listen to it, what you come up with, this is my take, is just so much powerful because now you're a different person. Now you're a
Mhm.
little bit more
Oh,
confident. Where
totally.
where if you gave into it when you were younger, you wouldn't. I don't know. It doesn't seem like there would be that much power behind it because I think all those challenges, the obstacles, the mistakes, that grittiness of life gives texture to whatever work you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I know with one instance for me, and I have so many stories of, not listening to my gut, but one of them, like I mentioned, I'm doing animated movie right now that I'm writing. And that animated movie has been in me for probably over 20 years. And up until last year, all I kept saying is to myself is, I'm not a writer. I can't write it. I'm not a writer. I can't write it. And I convinced myself for all of those years that I couldn't do it. And all I would do is pray every time a new Pixar movie came out. Please don't
That
be
it
on this.
wasn't that it wasn't that one, right? Yeah.
That's all I would do. And my husband would be like, you just need to do it. You just need to do it. So last year, I ended up getting a client that wanted me to produce actually a podcast for him. And he happened to be a Hollywood producer. So I was like, okay, God is speaking. Somebody is speaking. I need to listen. So after we
Yeah.
did our project, I reached out to him and I said, I've been working on this project for way too long, and I would love your help in me being able to put it together. And he said, of course, whatever you need. And so I started late last year. I started with like the story outline and all, and I'm like giving him whatever I'm creating. He's giving me notes, I'm making those changes. And so we're going back and forth and doing that. I don't think, in all honesty, as long as it's taking me, I don't think I would have really been able to do anything of substance with it prior to now. So I think in a weird way, it was supposed to happen now. And so I have to be content with that. That's what I believe anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life is a shit show, but I swear to God, as long as you're doing your best and trying your best, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I believe in karma and treating people right,
Mhm.
and helping people around you. It sounds all cliche. It sounds so hokey, but you know, even if you are ignoring that voice that was chipping away at you, Edie, I got to believe that you were trying to do the best you could
Oh,
in
yeah.
whatever you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think as long as anybody just tries their best, like your time will come. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be when you want, but just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Edie,
And
so
that's
how for somebody who isn't in your field, my field, maybe wouldn't have picked up these books, how would you what's the message? How would you implore them to really check this each book out? So for each book, can you just kind of I guess maybe a pitch to people as to why that book should stand out to them as one with great takeaways.
right. Well, I think definitely with Hello Fears, it is if you have a need or you recognize that there is something that's preventing you from being able to be who you are supposed to be, and that thing is fear, if you just recognize that fear is an issue that you have, and a lot of us have various fears, and you are trying to figure out how you can become more comfortable with being uncomfortable, then Hello Fears, I think, is a good motivating book for you to sort of see how this person, granted, she's addressing fears that you probably would never even want to deal with, but the fact that she did it, she not only did it, she didn't do it privately, she did it publicly because she filmed herself doing every single fear and published it on YouTube. And so if you could even just do one or two of your small fears based on this just motivating you, that's what I think it's more. It's a motivational book in that this person faced all of these fears that were huge fears, and it culminated with her. Now she's like an international speaker. She's like speaking all over the world and encouraging people to break through their fears. So that I definitely think if you have an issue with fears and addressing your fears, Hello Fears is definitely the book for you. If you feel like things just don't seem to be going right for you, whether it's that one decision after another has not turned into the life that you want and that something is missing, but you don't really know what that is, and things just don't seem to be going right for you, then I think Practical Law of Attraction is a good book that you can, like you mentioned before, John, it's an internal look at you because we are in control of everything that happens in our lives. And it's up to us to change who, if we really want to make a change, we have to look inward and address the issues that we have. And we have plenty of issues. I think with all the qualities and conditions that she talked about, I probably learned from every single one of them and adjusted things accordingly. Because I probably thought that I was like a super aware person, like I was aware of everything that was going on. And then when she broke it down, I was like, oh, no, actually, I'm kind of oblivious to certain things at certain times in my life. And that is something that I needed to pay closer attention to. So if you are just struggling and you're not really sure, whether it's that there's indecision on what you want to do, your business isn't going in the right direction that you thought it should be going in, or maybe even it's a relationship that you're having, because these books are not just for business. I applied them more to business, but they're for business as well as personal, then there are things within there that you can address. But I highly recommend that you do all of the exercises that come along with the books as well, because that just sort of solidifies everything that you're learning in them.
Yeah, I love that those books you describe them, Edie, as textbooks. Like it's not just here's what I did. It's like,
Right.
okay, now we're going to get to work.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
so valuable to
Yeah.
help people keep accountable to themselves.
Hmm.
Edie, in wrapping up, is there anything else? You just mentioned the live events before. Is there anything else that you want to share or mention before we go?
Well, I am going to be doing lives at least once a month, every other week, hopefully, continuing for April on through the rest of the year. So if you want to learn more, you can just connect with me on LinkedIn and get notified. And then other than that, you can check me out on my website.
Amazing. Thank you for that walkthrough of your life, career, and how these two particular books have impacted you, Edie.
Well, thank you for having me, John. This was really fun and different from anything that I've ever done, because I don't normally talk about books. I do like reading. I'm not a ferocious reader, but I do love reading, and these books really made a huge impact on my life. So I was glad that I was able to share them with you.
No, and I appreciate that. So the two books are the first one, Hello Fears, Crush Your Comfort Zone and Become Who You're Meant to Be by Michelle Poler.
Right.
And then the second book is Practical Law of Attraction, Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires by Victoria Gallagher.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Edie.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
And if there's anything that I might have missed, since we're limited on time, and again, I can go on different tangents. If there's anything that I might have missed that you think I should have asked Edie, please reach out, whether it's on my social media, wherever you might get this podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or the audio platforms, please reach out. I want to make sure that I can get as much as I can to my audience as possible. In the meantime, until the next episode, thank you for watching and listening. Take care. Bye.
Bye.